you've seen this before, right? This sort of deterioration of diplomatic relations and an uncertainty over the relationship has been going on for a few years now. Does this time feel different with the very quick escalation of barbs from Beijing over the past couple of weeks?
Oh, look, it's hard to put a precise, if you like, commentary around whether it's worse, better. I think at the moment, the focus for us has just got to be, particularly for organisations like us, and I'd also say in the media as well, that the focus for us has got to be to ratchet down the tension as much as we can and allow both sides to come together and have a fulsome discussion around what the issues are and hopefully find some common ground and move forward. I mean, the relations between the two countries for our members and, of course, for a lot of businesses between Australia and China is very important. This has come out in a number of surveys that we've done over the years. So the last time we did a major survey of all of our members, both in China and back in Australia, it was actually highlighted as the top risk that Sino-Australian relations top business risk for our members. So it goes to show that it's extremely important, but I don't want to oversell or get too involved in exactly what's happening at the moment. I think we need to get that an opportunity to work its way forward.
Is there sort of an immediate concern amongst your membership that this is going to trigger the kind of, I guess, consumer-led boycott that the Chinese ambassador seemed to suggest a few weeks ago?
Oh, look, I think some of the ambassador's comments were taken a little bit out of context from what I could see. Consumer behaviour here is, really going to be focused around whether it's a great product at a good price and reliable, and those sorts of things I think are far more important, and that's the area to really sort of focus on when it comes to consumer sentiment, not so much the situation with the bilateral relationship. Well, that's certainly what friends of mine around China would tell me, that's their focus in terms of making those decisions. But, the atmospherics are important, of course. There's no doubt about that. So we're hopefully going to look forward to these sorts of problems being resolved between the two governments over the coming weeks and months ahead.
When you spoke kind of in the middle of the pandemic lockdown in about mid-February, you'd spoken about in particular the pressure on some of the smaller members, the smaller businesses that you represent and have, within your membership. I'm wondering how they've come out of that, given that we're starting to see just, I guess, the green shoots of the start of the recovery in China.
Oh, look, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's been an enormously difficult period. Back then, I think when we last spoke, it was very much the situation we were facing over here, far more, if you like, in a far more real way for businesses over here than perhaps in Australia at that particular point in time. But this has now, been a big challenge for everyone. As you mentioned, there are some green shoots. Things look like they're sort of 85, 90%, if you like, getting back to normal, but demand for imports, so on the trade side, certainly for things like food and beverage, is going to be a little bit weaker. Looks to me, some recent numbers that we've seen coming through, that demand for resources is picking up, so that's good. But definitely for those smaller businesses, there's a little bit of room to make up. A lot of our members, like us as well, actually have been handling the situation as best they can through managing their costs as closely as possible. But yet we're starting to see a little bit of a pickup, certainly over the past few weeks, and with the National People's Congress coming up, we hope to see some strong stimulus measures that will point the economy towards a more positive outlook. Certainly hoping that'll help pick up demand for consumers in the economy.
What policy measures are you expecting from the two sessions then?
Oh, look, too early to tell. We'll find out a lot more in the next, starting next Friday. Certainly, we're expecting, as I think everyone is really, the significant amount of fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus. So, the government's has made a lot of statements that they're going to strongly support consumers and they're going to strongly support business. So we look forward to seeing what they come up with.
Has there been any kind of, I guess, an existential point for some of the businesses operating in China in terms of the questioning of their commitment to staying in China, the sort of reallocation or just dislocation that we've seen in supply chains? Do you hear from businesses that are thinking of either diversifying or moving away from China?
No, I don't think so. I think the case if you're already here in market operating, or if you've been looking at operating in market here over the past year or two, I don't think the case has changed a great deal at all as to whether you want to invest in this market. The coronavirus pandemic aside, and yes, there have been some significant supply chain adjustments. And we'll see how that plays out over the next 6 or 12 months as to how that works on a regional and global basis. But no, I mean, I think that the case for being here is no different really than it was 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Our members are certainly very strongly committed to remaining in market. That's exactly what I see from other international business around the community here in Beijing and across the country as well. We will see a change, yes, but I do think we'll manage and cope with those changes going forward. And look, we're about to survey our members again shortly, so we'll get a good picture from a statistical point of view about how they're looking as well. But anecdotally, no, I don't see a great deal of change.
What about, it's going to be a pretty long slog back to normal or to growth when it comes to these industries that are dependent on the lifting of international travel restrictions, right? What are you hearing from businesses that operate within, overseas education, international students, tourism at this point?
Look, tourism is particularly tough for obvious reasons. I think everyone's just having to manage their way through as best they possibly can. We've had a lot of engagement in the education sector. I mean, it's a huge sector, obviously, for the Australia-China relationship. It's a very important sector for the Australian economy, and it represents, 25 to 30% of my members actually are involved in education one way or another. I'm seeing a lot of strong commitment from particularly from the university sector and as well from the school sector in market. They've got their own domestic challenges as to how they're going to deliver their courses and content, and I suspect that they're very heavily focused on that at the moment. But they're supporting their students as much as possible. That includes international students from China. I think China will still remain a hugely important market especially for our universities. And who knows, when you look at how Australia has handled, and China for that matter, has handled the COVID-19 crisis, we may well be in a situation, later this year into next year, where the fact that we have managed it very effectively, where the fact that the fallout from a human perspective has been minimised as much as possible, and there's been some surveys around looking at how different countries have handled the crisis, and Australia's come out of it very well, as has China. That might actually make Australia an even more attractive destination for students, a more attractive destination for tourists, a more attractive destination for things like migration investment. So there might be some silver linings coming out of it in time.